Hi, everybody. Welcome to the YouTube channel of McRae's Window Cleaning. My name is Duncan. We're based right here in Brisbane, Australia. And this is the continuing series, the seven-parter on business building strategies. What do we mean? Well, we have a seven-part series on tips to help us grow personally, but also to how this will help us thrive in our business routine. So what's in today's video? Stay tuned. Well, welcome back to our interesting series here on McRae's Window Cleaning regarding business building strategies, and we're up to part 5. And in this video, we're going to discuss the really important need of setting boundaries. Now, what do we mean by setting boundaries? Well, before we define that, let's just look at a couple of scenarios. Hands up if you start projects but never seem to finish them. Maybe decision making can be a bit of a struggle, or you've got this in mind that this year you're going to lose some kilos and get fitter, but we haven't actually got there yet. So, what's the reason for that? What could be the underlying cause? Or in business and even in life, we have a difficulty saying no to people. Like, for instance, in business, people say, "Can you come and do this job? I need you to do it today." And you think, "I don't really want to," but you can't say no. So, what will help us to do that? Do we just need more self discipline, or is it something bigger than that? Well, one top thing to think about is how we approach these situations, how we look at these scenarios that we're dealing with. Uh, my wife describes it as like what you call reframing the view. So, for example, you might look out a window at a particular vista, but if you look out from a different window, maybe on a different part of the house, you see different things. So, our discussion today is like reframing. It's like we've gone to a different window and we're going to look at what could be preventing us from following through, or what could be preventing us from saying no to things we don't want to and saying yes to things we do want to do and accomplish. And this is where it comes down to setting boundaries. Now, this is important to think about because I think of it, it's like when I go on a plane, before you've even taken off, you know that the cabin crew do a safety drill. They show you the safety card that's in the pocket in front of you, but they also go through the things to do with life jackets. And the thing that captures my attention is the oxygen mask. So when you need oxygen, a mask drops down. And the direction to parents is before you fit the child next to you, fit your own. So, in other words, before you can help someone else, you need to make sure that you're secure, you're helped. And this is where boundaries are really useful, is because then you can structure your life in such a way that then when you help someone else, whether it's in business or personally, you're well equipped to be able to do so. So, what do we mean by boundaries? Well, boundaries is the practice of openly communicating and asserting personal values in such a way as to protect them, preserve them from being compromised or being violated. That's a really interesting definition. So, without values, then and having boundaries, then we can't set out clearly our identity. We can't then have a clear picture of who we are, and our identities become diffused. They even become controlled by others and by others' people's values. That's why we need boundaries. So it's setting a particular guideline. So that reminds us, doesn't it, of a questionnaire we talked about back in episode number 1 from the University of Pennsylvania on what are your strengths and values. And when we have a clear picture of that, that's a really important stepping stone It's like the mask has come down, and we now have an opportunity to breathe clearly and establish these boundaries. Now, what's involved? What aspects are involved with regard to setting boundaries? Well, it's interesting that when I did some research on this, three key aspects are critical. Firstly, as we mentioned, you need to define your values because any healthy relationship, say between me and you, depends on an interdependency between the two of us. We're both independent people, but we've got to interact. That means I've got to have values that I bring to the relationship, and so do you. And when they mesh together well and we each are contributing, we're able to have a successful relationship. So we need to honor our own values, defend them as well. We have a right to have them so that we can develop healthy relationships. The second area is that we need to assert those boundaries. Now, that may be with verbal communication or non-verbal communication. There's a number of different ways. So that requires, of course, for us to clearly communicate what we stand for and what we will accept and won't accept. And that's important because as we continue to honor and defend our own values, we establish our place in relationships and in society and interact with people. So, what are some ways in which we could firstly deal with our internal boundaries? Because it's no point setting boundaries for other people and how they interact with us if we don't have boundaries for ourselves. Remember, we talked about, I'd like to um, start this project, but I never get to finish it, or I'd like to lose some weight or get fitter, but I never get started. So, what are the boundaries with ourselves that we need to develop? Well, that's really, really crucial. And boundaries can come in a number of different ways. They can be porous, in other words, they're not really there. They can become very rigid. So, in other words, don't step inside my life. You keep people out, but that's not healthy either. But we need to try and develop some healthy boundaries, starting with ourselves, strengthening our own relationship with ourselves. So, what does it matter? What matters to you? What do you stand for? Without a why, it's a whole lot harder to say what and how. If you don't have a reason for a particular boundary, you don't understand a value, how can you say to someone, that's not acceptable? I'm not happy with that. Why? I can't really define it. Then we can't defend and honor our boundary, and it gives them an opening for them to tread over our boundaries and basically invade the space that we have, which then doesn't bring a healthy relationship. And that can be the same in business when people demand certain things of us and we struggle to say no because we haven't clearly defined what we stand for. So let's think of a couple of different ways that we could establish boundaries, firstly with ourselves and then as an entrepreneur. Now, a lot of my research has come from a very interesting book called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. The author is Nedra Tawwab, Tawwab. You can see that there on the screen. And that's really helped me to establish this aspect of boundaries. And it has helped me to develop more healthy relationships, both with clients, difficult clients, as well as easy clients, really good clients, but also in my day to day interaction with other people. So let's talk firstly about personal boundaries. Let's use an example of where we can set boundaries every single day, just with ourselves. So the area I'm thinking of is the use of technology. Now, technology, social media has really infiltrated, and my wife calls the smartphone the weapon of mass distraction. That's a really good term, the weapon of mass distraction. What can happen is that with all of the news feeds that constantly flood our phones, flood at the social media platforms, the news platforms, there is so much stuff that constantly is there for us to feed on, that we can become overwhelmed by what is going on. For many people, they've become news junkies. They see an item, they've got to watch it on this network, on that network, on that network, see what people are saying about it in various social media platforms, and it can become overwhelming. Social media, of course, with what people are doing in their life or what they say they are doing, has created a FOMO mentality. Yes, the fear of missing out. So, how do we conquer that? How can we set boundaries for ourselves, internal boundaries, just in dealing with this section of our life? Well, one tip: turn off news alerts. Unfollow people who always seem to be posting about tragedies. Like, we know bad things are happening. Do we need to constantly feed our mind and get weighed down by these news tragedies? If people want to talk to you about news items, just can we kindly ask them, please don't tell me all the gory details. When I read the news on a newspaper website, it'll say, warning, graphic detail. And then you look at it and think, well, I don't want to know the details. So I won't click on that. Can we set the same boundary with our friends? Please don't tell me the gory details. That life's bad enough around the world. And that can be really helpful. Now, one thing, of course, with social media is when I said unfollow people who are constantly posting about tragedies, but on the other hand, always posting about themselves. Sometimes there is a challenge when we unfollow people that we know well. I remember many years ago, someone was posting stuff that I didn't really want to know about on their social media platform, a friend of mine. So I unfollowed. 5 minutes hadn't gone by, and that person texted me and said, "What have I done? You've unfollowed me. Have I done something to upset you?" It's like, so it's so good these days, you can just mute people. If you're concerned about unfollowing them, you can just mute them. They have no idea that you've done that, and you won't see their post and their feed come up on your phone. That can limit the stuff that comes into our mind and heart. We're now setting some boundaries. So instead of FOMO that we talked about, fear of missing out, what about this one? JOMO, JOMO. Why don't we embrace the joy of missing out? Will your life really be poorer for not knowing what's going on in many places around the world? Something to think about. Another exercise that we could do to set ourselves a boundary with our smartphone is to try and measure how much time do we spend on social media, on mindless things that way. So that's setting a boundary personally. And when you think about it, if we cut back some of that, then we're now open up the opportunity for us to do things like exercise or something more creative, maybe a hobby project that we just want to get going on and we haven't yet. So setting a boundary for ourselves is really important. Now, what about as a business person, as an entrepreneur? That's what we are. If you've got a window cleaning business or exterior cleaning business, whatever it might be, a combination of all three aspects of cleaning internally, externally, building washes, whatever it might be, how can we set boundaries in that situation? Well, here's boundary number one that we can think about. Always charge the full fee. People who know you, like in Australia, it's common for people to say, "Hey, mate, I'll give you cash. Does that make the price lower?" Well, it's the cash economy that the government is trying to crack down on. So it's illegal. So now I've got to decide, what boundary am I setting for my business? So do we give those under the table discounts when there may be consequences for our business down the track? So having a set, this, I charge the full fee no matter who it is. Now, we might think, well, for some people I do offer a reduced rate. let's do that sparingly so that we don't begrudge jobs that come up like that where we feel obligated to offer a reduced fee. And that way we, we don't feel under pressure to perform for these people. Another thing that's really important as business people is to take a break. We're the boss, we can set limits as to how much we work. Whether we work every week or we take a week off every periodically just to refresh our mind and our body. That's really, really important. And it's really, really great to see some of fellow window cleaners on YouTube posting when they're away on vacation because you think, great, they're refreshing their mind and soul and being able to just regenerate in preparation for the next few weeks. Another way that we can set boundaries as a business person is to avoid phrases like, we've got to hustle harder. It's a grind out there making money in business, work hard now, worry about rest down the track, this non-stop mentality. That doesn't help us say no in situations where we need to. This is a quote that was in this book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace, regarding business, regarding the workplace. Consider this. Work is where people spend the majority of their time, and your time is valuable. Therefore, being comfortable in the space where you spend the most time is essential for your well-being. So think about it. What new boundary could you set for your business? How could you do that? You see, the relationship we have with ourselves, whether with our personal activity or with our business, it sets the tone for every other relationship we have. That's a quote from a lady called Jane Travis. These things that we've talked about are really essential so that we can feel like we're not chasing other people. Now, if we're always chasing after other people, maybe the boundary we need to consider is, am I just a people pleaser? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but we've also got to care for ourselves. We've got to care for our families, our wife, our children, if we have them. That's all important. So learning to set boundaries in a whole lot of different areas of life. Well, and not only that, but defending those boundaries and honoring those boundaries will help us to establish good relationships with people, both personally, with our friends, our circle of friends, but also in our business activity, particularly. People who don't really necessarily have a strong loyalty to us, but they do enjoy the service we bring to them on a regular basis. Having clear boundaries will assist that relationship to be maintained and help us when we're dealing with difficult ones as well as good clients. So what do you think? What boundaries could you set? Is there some area of setting boundaries that you've done in the past that you find has been very effective? If you have, look, why don't you leave some comments below and you'll enjoy reading what other people are saying about this subject. If you'd like to read more about this important aspect of boundaries, and we're going to develop it further in the next video when we discuss avoiding burnout. But if you'd like to read more about this, this is a very interesting newsletter that that discusses that. It's one that my wife writes every week, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy reading further about setting boundaries and about growth tips in general for personal development. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it and you'd like to share it, please do. If you are enjoying the videos that we're presenting for people, helping them with their business, and you'd like to help us out with our video creation, down in the description, there's a link to our coffee page where you can make a donation, contribute to the work we're doing. We have a goal of trying to upgrade our video and camera equipment. So if you're able to help us out there, we'd really appreciate that. And in the meantime, I hope life is treating you well and We look forward to seeing you in the next video, which is going to discuss avoiding burnout, how boundaries will help us to avoid burnout in this very pressured world that we are living in now. Take care, and we'll see you soon.